Let's jump to this next story from Deadline because we've got good news, and I'm really excited to cover this story. Jim Caviezel's anti-child trafficking thriller Sound of Freedom notches $10 million pre-sales before July 4th. And then we have this. Sound of Freedom and Indiana Jones duke it out on July 4th for the #1 spot. Check this out. Indiana Jones had 11.698 million over Sound of Freedom's 11.5 million. Sound of Freedom was only a couple $100,000 away from being the #1 film on the 4th of July. There's a lot to consider here. Indiana Jones made 83.7 million over the weekend, so most people who wanted to see the new Indiana Jones saw it over the weekend. People aren't going to watch it twice on the 4th of July. But still, the fact that an indie film is rivaling a major release only a few days later is tremendous. Y'all should go see this movie for two reasons. It's really good. I think half the theater was crying for the first 45 minutes. There's some really great story writing in there, really awesome stuff I'm not going to spoil. And the second reason is to help foster that parallel economy. Supporting indie films that are outside of Hollywood so that industry can compete and flourish and we can push back against this garbage is extremely important.
I got some questions about Sound of Freedom. You saw it. So
Absolutely.
Is
amazing.
It a documentary?
No.
Okay. Does it
thriller
talk about the cobalt mines in Africa?
No.
Okay. So
it is specifically the story of Timothy Ballard, who was a U.S. law enforcement, Homeland Security, and how he quit his job to go and rescue kids who were being trafficked.
Whoa.
And it is brutal.
And Jim Caviezel plays Ballard.
You're like, man, everybody in the theater was crying, like nonstop for the first 45 minutes. And then again, like 10 minutes later, there's parts where you get happy because the heroes are winning. You stop crying. And then it goes back to what's going on in this world. And you're just like fighting back tears.
You know what? A lot of, say what you will about him. He's a guy with obviously some flaws, but Mel Gibson, this is his film.
This is his?
Isn't it?
I don't know. He's one of my favorite actors of all time. I love him. Mel, come over.
Yeah. I know he's working on a documentary about, I think it's about Ukraine and trafficking and stuff like this. But I don't know.
I'm kind of worried about wanting to going to see this and then walking out of the theater wanting to go like hunt down pedophiles or something and being like charged for that.
But that's the point of the film. And by hunt down, the correct answer is support legitimate organizations that team up with international law enforcement to bring these people down. This is what Ballard's organization does. It's you want to stop these pedos and these traffickers, and you want to get involved in that. You watch this movie, and afterwards, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, how are we not putting more money into stopping what's going on? Because it is nightmarish.
It looks like Mel Gibson is not attached to this film, as far as I can tell. Eduardo Verastegui is the producer, and we have Alejandro Monteverde as the director, written by Rod Barr and Alejandro himself, Monteverde. So I don't think Mel is attached to this one.
Do you think, like, what ages do you, for the
Angel
audience
Studios.
is wondering, which ages do you think would be appropriate to see this?
Oof, 18 and up.
Really?
I mean, what's the rating on the movie, actually?
According to Jim Caviezel, Mel Gibson did weep when he saw the movie.
Oh, bro. Like, everyone in the theater was crying.
That's what I was talking about.
Everyone in the theater was crying. I will say this. I was on the verge of tears, and, I just fought him back. But everyone around me is crying. What was the rating? I'm looking it up. I don't see what the movie was rated. Because nothing. It doesn't show anything explicit, but it's heavily implied. Like, what's happening. There's a scene where there's a little girl in a bed, and a creepy guy walks in, and then it shows out the window, and he closes the blinds. Like, you get it. A kid would understand what was going on, but an adult would. I don't think you want to bring kids to this movie.
This, and it's such a universally repulsive thing that this movie attacks and go after. Like, even in prison, you hear stories, the people that get it worst, the worst criminals in the world will turn on is the people that get sent to prison for abusing children. So it's like a universal thing, at least in our culture, is that this is the lowest of the lowest of the low. And I think the point of this film is that it's not really being taken as seriously as it should.
How do you redeem?
It's PG-13.
Wow. How do you redeem the people like that, pedophiles? How do you redeem pedophiles? How do you make them no longer pedophiles?
You're not allowed to say.
It's the hardest thing. Well, obviously, I'm not talking about
Well, no. I'm fairly certain that they found recidivism among child abusers is like.
That's the worst
100%.
part. And then it's the people that have been abused as kids grow up, and then they think either it's okay because it happened to them, or there's some sort of weird. So, like, breaking that cycle is what humanity needs to do because we can't just kill ourselves off and stop it that way. That's not effective.
You arrest them.
Well, that's one way you can slow it down.
I got to tell you, I want to say this. When I was watching this movie, I started having a whole bunch of thoughts about the moral philosophy of crime and punishment and the appropriate solutions and how you deal with these people. Because there's a lot of people that have advocated for the death penalty for traffickers, especially, and for pedophiles. You watch this movie and you'll go, I completely understand the moral position. The issue is, and I'm watching this movie. I don't want to spoil anything, but let me just tell you. There's no mustache twirling villain. There's not a guy who's like, we're taking kids. It's like the scary thing is the banality of it. The guy who grabs a little girl and throws her in a cargo box and then gets handed an envelope of cash and walks away like nothing happened. The simplicity, the horror of it. And I thought to myself, what is the punishment for destroying humanity in this way? And I understand why people say that through due process, quite literally. Like, I'm not going to play any stupid games and talk bravado. Like, you arrest them and then they get sentenced to death. My fear, as always, with the death penalty is that innocent people will get caught up in it. And if 1% of the people who are charged are innocent, put to death, we have a very, very, very serious problem. I side with the Founding Fathers, Blackstone's formulation. But when you see this film, it really makes it difficult. And I thought to myself, I don't think the Founding Fathers understood the massive scale of child sex trafficking and slavery that would be happening when they were like, we should be very, very concerned. Or maybe the reality is they truly understood the depravity of evil in this world and understood the importance of innocent until proven guilty and, due process rights. But I got to tell you, I don't know what the solution is, but when you see these crimes being perpetrated, oh man, I just got to tell you, I understand why people advocate for amending the laws to have the death penalty for child exploitation.
One place to start would be to get our government to stop perpetuating this. Because that in Afghanistan, this is kind of a big part of that culture. And the United States went to war against a regime that was very bad, but did outlaw this. And we allied ourselves with one that perpetuated it. And we had our own soldiers suffering PTSD because their allies would go in the next room and molest a child, and they were ordered not to do anything about it.
Rape.
And then they had to come back with that, knowing that they were protecting those people and perpetuating that government. And they still have to live with that. And God knows what the children over there have to go through.
There's a scene. Man, I really don't want to spoil this movie. Yeah. But let me just tell you, so you can understand without spoiling the film. This is about an undercover operation.
Oh, man.
What do you think a person in an I shouldn't frame it like this. He doesn't, the main character never does anything untoward. But when you're in law enforcement, like in the beginning of the movie, he's doing his job. He has to review evidence. And it's just like him crying the whole time. And I'm just like, There's a scene in the trailer, so this is not a spoiler, where a guy's like, I cannot do this job. And he like walks off. It's like, yeah, dude, who could? I'm surprised there's anybody who could stand that. But if nobody does that job, these evil people get away with it.
And may turn other people into evil people. That's the worst part about it, is it affects children when they're young, and then it can twist them early. And
dude, the writing is so good. I want to spoil the movie so bad because I want to tell you just how good it was, but I can't. I gotta wait. I
had a fantasy about interviewing Charles Manson before he died, because I thought if we can somehow get through to the worst of the worst and let them tell their story, and you see why they became that way, maybe that's like a step towards antidote.
You don't think someone like Manson actually has is sick? Because I think that there are some people that have mental illness that are really, really sick, and they need to be taken out of regular society. Not because I want them to, or because I think that they deserve to be punished or whatever, but because they're actually sick. There are medications that do help. Mm-hmm. There are people that, if they don't take their medication, they do behave in ways that are unacceptable. They harm themselves, they'll harm other people. So I don't know that I agree with with the idea that you can figure out what's wrong and just love them back to health. I think there's a lot of mental illness that is really, really, really sick people that really need the medications that they're on.
And he's right, and he's right for an even bigger reason. You and him, being on the edge of tears watching that movie, the reason you're on the edge of tears, the reason it makes you upset and angry is because you have something that is called empathy. And empathy requires your ability to map somebody else's mind to sort of simulate what they are feeling and what they're experiencing. Some people do not have the capability to do that. It usually tracks with like being lower intelligence. That's why you have so many criminals. They're also not very intelligent. And the reason is that they don't have the ability to think about how another person would feel on the receiving end of their behavior. They don't know how to do unto others as you like to do unto yourself. They have no idea how to imagine how anybody else would feel. They'll punch you in the face without thinking about it, because what prevents us in many ways from doing evil things is we think, gosh, if somebody did that to me, I would be horrified. That would be, and you empathize. So these people don't have the ability to do that, and it's not something you can really create.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.